This video is based on official crash reports and eyewitness testimonies. We will delve into one of the most tragic events in aviation history. This is the story of Flight 980, operated by Overseas National Airways. Flight 980 was a Douglas DC-9 aircraft operated by Overseas National Airways under the name Antilliaans Luchtvaartmaatschappij. The aircraft, registered as N935F, took off from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York, bound for Princess Juliana Airport in St. Martin in the Caribbean. On board were 57 passengers and 6 crew members. The captain of the flight was 37-year-old Ballsy. Ballsy had accumulated 12,000 flight hours, with 1,700 of those hours on the DC-9. The first officer, Harry, was 25 years old with 3,500 flight hours, 600 of which were on the DC-9. Also in the cockpit was 35-year-old flight engineer, Hugh, a role that has become rare in modern aviation. The flight began smoothly, but as they cruised over the Atlantic Ocean, weather conditions started to deteriorate rapidly. Captain Ballsy and his crew closely monitored these changes, knowing that worsening weather could pose significant risks for their challenging landing ahead. As the plane approached St. Martin, the weather worsened further. Around 14:25, air traffic control contacted the captain, informing him that conditions were not suitable for landing. Captain Ballsy considered diverting to San Juan and requested clearance. However, shortly afterward, he was informed that the weather had improved and a landing was possible. At this point, the aircraft had only 2,600 kilograms of fuel remaining, but the weather took a turn for the worse again. The cloud base dropped to 800 feet, and visibility was reduced to just 5 kilometers. The flight crew was trying to land under these challenging conditions. Air traffic control reported that cloud cover was expected at 1,500 feet, with visibility remaining at 5 kilometers. These conditions posed a serious threat to the approach and landing. Pilots must exercise extreme caution when dealing with difficult weather conditions. Landing at airports like Princess Juliana, which is near sea level, is particularly challenging due to the low cloud ceiling and limited visibility. The DC-9 began descending from 10,000 feet, preparing for a swift landing. However, due to the poor weather conditions, the pilot saw the runway too late. The aircraft was not in a suitable position for landing, and Captain Ballsy decided to go around. The first attempt was unsuccessful. At 14:50, a second landing attempt was made, but again, the runway was not visible due to bad weather, and they had to go around once more. In both landing attempts, the pilots had set 25 degrees of flaps and approached at 140 knots. However, the conditions did not allow for a safe landing either time. By now, the fuel level was critically low, and the pilots were under immense pressure. The flight crew had miscalculated the fuel due to erratic readings on the fuel gauges, making each landing attempt increasingly risky. Fuel management is crucial for pilots. Each go-around maneuver increases fuel consumption, reducing the chances of a successful landing. As Captain Ballsy continued his landing attempts, he realized the fuel was depleting rapidly, complicating the decision-making process even further. On the third landing attempt, Captain Ballsy requested full flaps and further reduced the aircraft's speed to descend. However, once again, the aircraft was not properly aligned with the runway. After 3 unsuccessful attempts, Captain Ballsy considered returning to San Juan, but decided it was more prudent to divert to the closer St. Thomas Airport. The rapidly depleting fuel put the crew in a dire situation. Captain Ballsy noticed a discrepancy between the fuel gauges and their calculated fuel remaining. Suspecting a malfunction, he didn't take any chances and began descending to visually align with the water, preparing for a possible ditching. Ditching an aircraft is one of the most challenging maneuvers a pilot can perform. Aligning the aircraft parallel to the water's surface reduces the risk of breaking apart upon impact. Captain Ballsy carefully observed the waves, aiming for the safest possible angle to maximize the passengers' chances of survival. Descending to 500 feet, Captain Ballsy alerted the cabin crew to prepare the passengers for a ditching. However, the aircraft's PA system was malfunctioning, and the passengers were not adequately informed. The cabin crew quickly instructed the passengers to brace for impact, but many did not fully grasp the severity of the situation. The DC-9 ditched into the ocean, but the impact was severe. The plane broke apart and sank. The ocean made rescue efforts challenging, but the U.S. Coast Guard, Navy, and Marine Corps quickly responded. Of the 63 people on board, 23 lost their lives, while 40 survived, some with injuries. Captain Ballsy's skillful ditching kept the plane intact long enough to increase the number of survivors, but better communication could have potentially saved more lives. During the rescue, the life rafts on board the aircraft failed to deploy properly. Life rafts airdropped by the U.S. Coast Guard landed too far from the survivors. The helicopters and boats involved in the rescue managed to save the remaining survivors, highlighting the importance of having reliable survival equipment on board. The wreckage of the DC-9 remained mostly intact after the ditching, but it sank to a depth of 1,500 meters, making recovery impossible. The crash investigation was conducted by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. The NTSB concluded that the primary cause of the accident was fuel exhaustion. The captain's inability to manage fuel effectively after multiple failed landing attempts was identified as a key factor in this tragic event. The NTSB also emphasized the need for improved crew coordination and better communication between air traffic control and pilots following this incident. The changes made to aviation safety protocols as a result of this crash serve as important lessons for future flights. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us continue to bring you detailed analyses of aviation disasters. See you in the next video.